Hey guys, thanks for checking out the My Career Path podcast, and welcome to the show if you are new. This is a place where we talk about careers and people's career paths to hopefully help show you how you can have the same career or something similar to it. Today, I have another awesome guest, Carl Rippy, who is actually the chief meteorologist over in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and he and I crossed paths actually down in Zion's National Park, of all places. While my family and I were on vacation, he and I just kind of got to chatting, and I invited him to be on the show. We're just going to kind of jump straight into the interview. I forgot to hit the recording button a little bit sooner, so he just starts answering how long he's been a chief meteorologist, and we just kind of go from there. So, hope you enjoy.
To be in charge of the weather department, it's nice to have a title, and with being a chief, the weather department more or less has to answer to me, and then I, of course, have to answer to those, my superiors, my boss, so people that above me. But it just keeps things a little bit more chain of command-ish. And that way, if I want to put something in motion and I know that's how it goes, then I can just do that without a lot of interference, and we can just run seamlessly. And most general managers, they like it if you just take things and they want to be able to trust. So in having that title, there's some trust there, some credibility, and it just makes it easier all the way around.
Yeah. So how long have you worked as a chief meteorologist?
Well,
or as a meteorologist in general, I guess I should say.
Yeah, Colten, there's been a couple of times where I've had that title. So probably 5 years as a chief in a couple of different stations. I've also worked under chiefs, which I don't mind at all. I can fit right in whatever is necessary. I know what they expect. They know I know what they expect, so it works out pretty well. So it really isn't about the position necessarily. It's just about the situation, the station, and when I've done national weather or I've been in an international sense, that's a little different than what we have where I am here at Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Yeah. So what's kind of the main differences between like the international meteorologist and kind of local news network?
That's a great question, because there is a lot of difference in terms of national or international. The anonymity on like in the community, there's a lot of anonymity in the community because we aren't broadcasting local, so they may not see us every day. Like in a local sense, I come into people's homes, into their guard shacks, into their offices if they're working overnight, and they know who I am. If I'm out in public, we have a conversation, I'm recognizable. On a national or international level, I may not actually run into anyone at the store or the gas station that recognizes me, but if I'm on a flight, maybe someone that is watching or has watched the national segments, they may be more likely to recognize me. So there's a huge difference in how we meet the audience, and I really like the local part of it because I feel like I'm connected to the community. But I like the national and international positions too, because they offer so many different things. We're covering weather in a different way. Maybe it's across the nation, or if it's international, maybe it's hurricanes that are building, in the Atlantic or the Caribbean or things like that. So it's different in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So just kind of the difference between kind of being in that local community, having that sense of like, I have a direct impact and know all these people. I know, it really matters to them. And then the international, where you're kind of more broad strokes in a way and helping people that way.
Right.
Gotcha.
And, the other thing in terms of just the weather itself, we've had a couple days of severe here across Wyoming into the western panhandle and Nebraska, the Central Plains. I can broadcast real time, and if we have debris or if we have tornado, if we've got lightning, if we have flash floods, if we've got warnings that are being issued, I can get that right back to the viewer in real time. Where on a national
Hmm.
level, we may have a little bit of separation from what's happening right down at the level where people live. It might be, like you say, a little broader.
Yeah. So let's go back to kind of your very first job, maybe as a teenager, or maybe where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in south central Idaho,
Okay.
south
So
of
you
the
probably
Snake.
started working on a farm like a lot of the people that I knew, probably something like that.
Very much like that. It's ranch, it's ag. My best friends were cowboys, cowgirls, and same thing. We there were landowners that worked worked the land as farmers or project managers. So there was a lot of that. I'm glad to have grown up in the high desert in a community where the population density really isn't much. Our nearest neighbor, even to this day, is a quarter of a mile. So it was, kind of a stretch for me to go from that. One of my first jobs, other than working and being a young boss and growing up in a trucking company, and we also stacked hay, but my first job that I actually went and sought after was on radio.
Really? So you kind of
It,
sought out the broadcasting kind of career.
it fell to me. I was on my way to Boise from our Boise, Idaho, which is the capital city. I was
Uh
on
huh.
my way to get parts. We needed some parts to fix some equipment, and I heard an ad on the radio that there was a Christian station in Boise that was looking for people to announce and to be DJs, and I didn't know anything about that, but I thought that was interesting. So I drove right straight to that radio station, walked in. The general manager and his main, I would say, receptionist or secretary were right there in the front reception area. And he says, well, let's go do a air check. And we both knew what he was going to say. I mean, I sat down at a mic and he had some stuff for me to read. And they pretty much hired me right then. So I would go over there on the weekends and work that radio job.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah. Well,
So you kind of it just kind of happened. I mean, you heard the broadcast thing. You said, you know what? I'm just gonna go try for it. Why not?
Yeah, I had an interesting, just as we're talking about this, as I reflect back on that, it's really something that I wanted to do. And that station reached our community. So the people that were in Indian Cove, where I grew up, they would hear me on the radio. And a lot of the stuff that while I was actually on the air, I just would kind of embellish. Some of it I even made up. I just, would keep going. And nobody ever said anything.
That's awesome. So those cowboys and cowgirls that you were friends with were like, hey, that's Carl. Carl's on the
They,
radio.
so I'd get back home. And so in my community, when I'd come back home or when I would be around for the week, they'd say, hey, well, we heard you on the radio. And I'd be like, yeah, that was fun. And, it just kind of was, it just really fell to me. It wasn't the mechanics of being in a station because there's at a radio station in those days there was lots of switches, there was dials. You had to record the public announcements at the top of the hour to play the next hour. So there was a lot of things to do. I wasn't real good at that, but as far as being on the microphone and talking about the songs and the people singing and, the different things or where they'd been or what they'd done, that really was easy for me.
That's awesome. What do you think was the most surprising thing when you kind of first started? When you first jumped on the mic, what surprised you the most?
The response of the audience.
In what way? What do they say?
They liked it, and then and I was like, what? To me, because it was true. I didn't know what I was doing.
Well, I mean, same here. I just kind of grabbed a microphone one day and was like, what, let's just talk to people about their careers. I'm sure they'd enjoy it. I'm sure somebody likes it like I do. So it's just kind of funny when you kind of put yourself out there and do something where you're like, I don't know if I'm qualified. I don't know if I really know how to do that, but you're trying and you kind of learn as you go. Man, doors just kind of open up to you.
Yes, they do. And it's really, so another thing about that is I felt like I was doing what I was supposed to do. I mean, I knew how to work. And when you're in an agricultural situation or in a ranch situation, or anyone that's growing up kind of in that environment, you work. You work from dawn till dusk, and sometimes you work 24 hours. You work until the work is done. I could do that, and it wasn't that I didn't like it, but I really enjoyed being kind of in the mass media, in the communications. I've always really liked that. It's just a real love of mine.
Okay, so after you got your job kind of in the broadcasting, you got your first, little gig and whatnot, where did you go after that? Did you kind of stay in that Boise area or did it kind of move around?
Well, Boise, so I did stay because I had obligations at home to family and the family business, and there wasn't really any option for me to travel at that point. So I tapped into a lot that was going on in Boise, and as a growing city and a really awesome place to be. Boise's a kind of a secret, or used to be a secret, in terms of climate and a lot of the outdoors things that you can enjoy. I mean, you can water ski and snow ski in the same day at the right time of the season.
Yeah. I grew up in Boise. I know when
you did.
The weather. Yeah. The weather in Idaho is, if you don't like the weather in Idaho, wait 5 minutes and then maybe it'll be something different. That's what I always remember.
Right. And there's lots of, like you can, if you were in the city, you can do whatever the city offers, or you can go out in the desert and you can target practice. You can do, as soon as you get out of the city limits in the county, Ada County, you can do, it's just really offered a lot.
Yeah.
But in terms of commerce, I got involved with an agency there, right kind of in the heart of Boise City, and the Blanche B. Evans, who was the main person there, she kind of took a liking to me and would give me jobs and put me out kind of in the public. And to answer your question, one of the first things I did was a telethon. And I was just talking about this to a friend of mine just yesterday. I put on a tuxedo. I had a tuxedo at that time. I put my tux on, went to that telethon, and they thought that I was going to be talent. I was going there to be on the phones. So the one of the DJs in the radio station, the popular radio station, he was like, "Come over here," and I started handing him stuff. And the next thing you know, he's sticking the mic in my face, and so I'm just rattling stuff off. I never made it to the phones.
That's nothing quite says, dress for the job you want when they just pull you on stage with a tux.
Right. Well, I knew if I didn't wear something really nice, I'd hear from my agent. So I found the best thing in my closet.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How old are you when you kind of were starting to do those a little bit more?
Well, let's see, 20, 19, 18, somewhere in there.
Okay. That's awesome. And then at that time, were you thinking about maybe going to college? I don't know. What's your educational background?
Well, I'm still going to college. I've had a lot of education, which I really encourage everyone to keep at that. It's always good to learn something. Mm-hmm. I was interested in movies and being in that kind of that next level. That's what kind of caught my attention, and I knew I needed to start somewhere. So that's where I fell in.
So you kind of chose like acting or communications kind of, or do you have like a bachelor's degree? Editing Colten here. If you like what you hear, make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're watching on podcast, make sure to leave a 5-star review. Just want to let you know there was a little bit of a hiccup with the audio right here, so I just kind of cut and jumped ahead to where he's answering about what background he has. He has a bachelor's degree in meteorology, and we'll just kind of get right back into that interview. We're good. You can keep going. So
Okay,
you got a
well,
bachelor's in meteorology.
yes. Yeah, which is probably one of the tougher degrees to get in terms of science and math and all that goes with that, calculus. There's a lot of chemistry, physics. So it was really challenging for me. I had to study pretty hard to get through some of those classes. Ironically, one of the hardest class, thermodynamics, was one of the easiest for me. So I
Really?
you just never know. But yeah.
Huh. Yeah, because that's one that I've heard is just tough because there's a lot of physics that go into it, the laws.
Yeah.
There's a lot to remember with thermodynamics. And yeah, that's really cool because you don't really think about that when you're watching your weatherman on TV, that there's a lot of science and a lot of chemistry of going back to understand what actually creates the weather and the atmosphere around us.
Right, very true. And because of that, in the ever-changing world of weather, it really does offer a lot of variety to me. So it keeps me interested.
Yeah. Would you say if someone was wanting to be a meteorologist, the weatherman, was it important for them to have a bachelor's degree or some kind of educational certificate to get that kind of a job?
I think so. I think that makes the path much easier, and it makes you a candidate that some of the higher paying stations would be more likely to engage. It isn't out of the realm of reality for a person not to have a meteorology degree to do weather, but really to move through that career. It is, I think that is probably one of the main, it's a prerequisite, it's a priority.
Yeah. So after you did kind of communication and a little bit of broadcasting, when did you kind of shift over more into meteorology and kind of being, involved with the weather a bit more?
I was in Nashville. I was working actually in civil engineering, and it had kind of come to me that it was time for me to get back into TV because I'd been in and out for a while. And my first injection into that station at WSMV, which is the NBC affiliate in Nashville, was on the news side. And I was working kind of up on the assignment desk. I'd gotten an internship, and they had me answering the phone. Well, the ringer that was on the wall would ring, and it was on my left side, which my left side of my hearing isn't as good as my right side. I couldn't hear it ringing. And the news director came out one day and he says, what's the most annoying thing to a news director? And I looked at him and I was like, no. And he says, when the phone keeps ringing and you don't answer it. And I'm like, I didn't even know it was ringing. So that the next day, this is just one of those things where you're just blessed, and I just feel these things that fell to me. I went downstairs to the studio. Nancy Van Camp was in the studio, and she saw me come in. There was a double entry, so it's soundproof in there. Yeah. And she says, so, Carl, what's your story? What do you want to do? And I said, well, I'd really like to be a weatherman. I'd really like to do the weather. And she says, well, then you should do that. The next day, I'm downstairs, and the chief meteorologist there is still Lisa Spencer. She used to be at the Weather Channel. She set me up with Dan Thomas. Dan Thomas, he worked in the services, armed services. He'd done sorties for the missiles, and he was super sharp. But he also kind of took a liking to me, so I sat shoulder to shoulder with him. They all took me under their wings, and it was it was on at that point. That's how I really got into weather.
Wow, that's awesome. I just love that because for me, and what I've noticed a lot more since graduating college, I graduated from USU with a bachelor's degree in international business. And something that I think I've noticed a lot is if you want a particular job or career, finding people or talking with people in that field, again, just it opens so many doors. It allows you to get in. Like networking is huge. And I think that's something that is just highlighted in your story where you were able to connect with people who were able to say, you know what? Yeah, I'll teach you. Let's learn. Let's get you up there. Let's do it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's just awesome.
It really worked out well. And because I was downstairs in the weather center, I was out of the news director's hair. So it worked out really well for all of us.
It was a win-win.
Yeah, it was. He liked me. And I never said anything about not being able to hear but I could not hear that bell.
That's so funny. Oh, man. All right. So kind of explain what you do on like a daily basis. What does a normal day for you look like at a news network as the chief meteorologist?
Well, especially, in an active weather area, which we really have, high elevation, lots of severe weather makes it through the all of Wyoming. It rotates off the Front Range from Colorado and then works up into Montana, and or it works over into the Great Lakes region, the Central Plains and beyond. I keep my pulse on the weather. If it's sunshine and bubblegum, I don't have to be as engaged. But like today, we were really set for severe because we had all kinds of stuff happen yesterday, 100-mile-an-hour winds. We had tornadoes. We had damage from hail, 4.5-inch hail.
Whoa.
I mean, it was a monster of a storm. It was a destructive storm, and it was not pleasant for those that were under the influence of that system.
Yeah.
So it's up to me to keep my eyes on that. I have to inform my team of, do I need them in the studio? Do I need them on call? Do I need them to be there? What's our demands for the day? So there is that part where I stay engaged in the weather. And in severe weather, when we're covering it, the show still has to be built for the newscast. So if I got to manage that and keep that going. And part of what people don't see is because I am in the public eye, I pretty much have to be on the whole time. I can't just go out in my pajamas or sweatpants or whatever, even if it's just to go to the dumpster or, go up to get my mail. I've got to pretty much always be on point because somebody will see me, they'll take a picture and they'll send it to the station or they'll post it. And, it only has to happen one time. And I don't want to learn that lesson. So I really have to stay kind of in that job, even on the weekends. People will ask me, well, what's the weather like? And I can't just say, well, I don't know. Because, because they'll be like, well, he's a weatherman. He should know.
Yeah, shouldn't you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a lot of what I have to do, I think.
Well, that's something I didn't think about a whole lot, is kind of not keeping up a public persona, but like you really have to be the same person on and off camera in a way.
Yes.
You can't put on a mask or be a totally different person. You're representing the network pretty much wherever you go.
Right. The good name of the station. And that, I don't mind that. It comes to me pretty easily. And I truly am about the same on camera as I am off camera. So it works out just fine.
Oh, I noticed that when we met at Zions and we started chatting, and that's where we kind of got introduced. I was like, yeah, he's just a straight shooter. He's just fun to talk to. I could tell it. So I was glad that we kind of connected.
I am too. That was really good. And it's interesting you asked me these questions. Some of it I take for granted, but for the people that have clicked in or are watching this, it's super important to be yourself on camera as you would be in person, because the audience is they'll call you out on it every time. If you're not authentic, you'll hear about it.
Yeah, people have that kind of detection, and so it's like you just you can't really fake it, I guess. You know, it'll come out one way or the other.
Yeah,
And I just think that's super important, regardless of what you're doing. Even if you're not on video or camera or
true.
anything like that,
That's a
you
good
have to
point.
be who you are. You know, you can only fake it so far. Um,
Right, right. And people will give you a benefit of the doubt if, sometimes things do get sideways on you, but only for a few seconds.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
I want to ask a little bit about your first few weeks as kind of being the weatherman. All right. So you got taken under the wing. You have some awesome mentors.
Yes.
What was it like those first few weeks? What was the main learning points, the hardest thing you had to pick up on? Tell us about that.
So as an intern in Nashville, uh, with Dan Thomas, my mentor, and Nancy Van Camp being right there working with me, and Lisa Spencer, you know, every little thing I did, I was super excited about being there, and I committed myself to doing that. I also had a full-time job and a part-time job while I was being an intern just to keep everything going. So I was pretty busy, but the uh, the environment that I was in terms of being there in the studio and enjoying that, it was just super exciting. And as an intern, because I would be working behind the scenes and once in a while I'd go back and forth with whoever was actually on screen or reporting the weather, I would interact with them. Maybe I would give them the latest update on a storm that was coming through, because Nashville gets a lot of severe weather also.
Yeah.
Uh, in being put right there kind of on camera but not on camera, I started to get fan mail as an intern. And Dan would be like, okay, got another email. Come over here and read this. And I would, and he'd just shake his head. I mean, it was really remarkable how that worked. And it's been the only thing that has given me pause. I mean, like even just talking about it, it brings a tear to my eye. It's the only thing I've ever enjoyed. And when I told my mom that I'm going to get back into TV, she would say, well, she said, it's the only thing that you've ever really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And it's true. My best friend at the time, I told him, I said, I'm going to get back at TV. And he said, well, it's about time. So, the people that know me knew that was, I mean, that's really the thing that it's a call on my life that is synchronized what I do as a profession to what I'm supposed to do in terms of life in just general.
Why do you think that is? Because I think a lot of people, and especially college students and whatnot, really struggle with trying to find what their kind of calling is. Because I believe the same thing. I think that there is a reason for us being here, and that we need to, kind of find what that is in order to help other people. But finding that, I think, is so hard. So what really stuck out to you with being on TV, it being in the news, that just made you say, you know what, this is what I should be doing?
If I do a presentation or I speak to students or if I'm in a conversation with someone, and this will resonate with you because I can tell we're on the same page. We know in our hearts what we're supposed to do. Everyone knows what they're supposed to do. It's just sometimes a matter of finding it. And there's exercises that I put people through to help drill down to that so that they actually can find that. But if we don't do what we are called to do, if the call on our life is not realized and we live it out, we're not living our best life.
Yeah, I'd agree. And there's so much more fulfillment, I think, when you kind of
Yes.
find what you are. Because, let's see, who was I think it was a psychologist. His name was Csikszentmihalyi. I always mess up his name. But he studied the art of the flow. Like when you get into a work or a project and like time just kind of like fades away. I'm sure you've gotten it where it's just like you're doing everything. You just know what's going on. You're grooving. You're jiving.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of figuring out, what kind of gets you into that sense of, I have this sense of purpose and I'm good at it and I can just kind of go along.
Exactly. And I think all of the steps that we go through build on how good we are at what we do. Growing up in a fast-paced, high-pressure environment that deadlines were super important. Had I not had that experience as a young man and a teenager and then on through, I probably wouldn't be able to handle television because it's a highly critical, high pressure. It's difficult at times. There are so many things that we go through that we didn't choose, that happened to us because it shaped us to be who we are today. And if we really utilize that experience, it'll make us better at what we're doing now.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Let's see. If someone were to want to join your team, like let's say work with you, work under you, and you were the hiring manager, what would be some of the main traits or skills that you kind of look for in that kind of potential hire or coworker?
So in taking some notes, I have an answer for that. The things that I really look for somebody to join my team, it's super important for them to be able to, for me to be able to see if they're going to get along with the rest of the team. And a lot of times someone will come and they'll have credentials, or maybe they'll have awards that they've won and they bring that. That's not the first thing I look for. I mean, I want people to be competent and have that ability to work in and have that knowledge. The thing that I also look for is if they're what their work ethic is like. You can only get along for so long by not working. I mean, you might be getting paid and you might be clocking in, but if you're not producing, eventually that'll catch up with you. So any of you that are spending a lot of time on your phone or spending time not really working, be careful, because there'll be consequences of that. It'll eventually catch up with you. I'm trying to find where I had a very succinct answer to that. That's a pretty common question. Go ahead.
I'll kind of interject for a second because I have another episode that's in the works. I don't know if it'll be posted by the time this goes out or not, but I was looking at kind of soft skills versus hard skills. And I think that kind of goes along with what you're saying, is that there's a lot of times where people might have, major accomplishments, a lot of education or experience, but if they don't mesh well with the team, if they don't fit with the kind of company culture, that can seriously overthrow any accomplishment or achievements that people may have. And so I think especially as a potential hire or someone looking to get into any position, any career, you got to be able to communicate well and connect with people. Find the way that you can actually talk with them, build a relationship, and work well, even though you might have some differences. And that's something that I noticed a lot in the research for that episode, is seeing how important it was for a person to be basically a good person. And the credentials and everything else is somewhat secondary or even maybe tertiary, where those skills, especially in the interview stage, are just probably the most important that people look at when looking at new hires.
Yeah, so you actually answered that question better than I did, because you talk about soft skills and hard skills. The things that I have written down is that striving for excellence. I hold that. I mean, I try to do that myself, and I think that I'm pretty critical, pretty hard on myself in within that category, because I think that it really separates the, the mediocre from the people that really do rise to the top. The integrity of a person, it's important that they really do bring their best self, and that is who they are in private as well. That strong work ethic that we talked about,
Mm-hmm.
especially in television. Sometimes people take off for the vacations, they'll take off for holidays, and those that are coming in as the new hires, they're expected, it just kind of falls to them to work those days. They may work 2 or 3 weeks in a row.
Wow.
That's just the way it is. I don't see that changing. And here's something too, and I know that this will be something that you'll agree with: a positive mental attitude.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, because we live in a world, it's ever changing, it's mutating, as you mentioned, and it's easy to be negative. It's a little harder to be positive, and to keep that positive mental attitude so that what we say is also positive. Because it's easy to say things negative. It's easy to talk behind people's backs. I really make it a policy not to talk behind people's backs. The saying is, if they talk about people behind their backs, they're likely to talk behind you behind your back.
Right.
I don't want to be that guy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and the other thing, in just talking with people about their careers and whatnots, and kind of asking them the same question, a lot of the times they kind of go, you know what? Sometimes I don't even care what you know about, meteorology or whatnot, because those are things that, if you have that positive attitude, like you're saying, that good work ethic, you'll pick up on it fairly quickly.
Yes.
We have the tools, we have the training to kind of get you to that point where we need you to be. But you need to be able to bring yourself with us. You got to keep up. We're gonna keep going, and that's something that I think is kind of hard, because the soft skills are a little harder to pick up. It takes character, it takes change to actually make that happen. But once you kind of do, and not saying that I've gotten there, I'm not perfect at it either, but it's something that we have to kind of keep working on, like you've mentioned.
Yes, I agree. And, I can always tell someone that is working hard on themselves, because they'll say something like you just said: I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. I still have things to learn about just being social, about weather, there's an ever-changing world. But if I need to know, I can find someone that maybe knows more than I do. And I like being around people that are in that realm where they bring me up a notch. If I'm going to play tennis, I want to play with somebody that's better than me.
Right. Help bring you to that level. I would agree with you.
Yeah.
Real quick, talk a little bit about how meteorology has kind of changed over the years. Because I'm sure, just like a lot of careers, technology has hopefully helped it, and there's a lot of changes, and you kind of have to be able to adapt. What's that been like for you?
Well, let's rewind, let's say 20, even just 20 years, not that long, where we were analog and we had the 4x3 televisions. We went from analog
with the bunny ears. Yeah.
Yeah, with the antennas, and you had to that changeover from the analog to digital. That was a tough one, because the stations were all set up analog, and going digital had to be rewired from the ground up. Everything had to change. And then we went widescreen.
Mm-hmm.
So in going widescreen, the converters back in the day, they, instead of having all of the right equipment, they bought these converters, which made everybody a little shorter and a little wider. And there was panic in the industry at that point.
Really?
Oh, I was lucky. I was super fortunate. It all agreed with me. It didn't put me into a panic. But there it was a major transition. And then with the digital being so crisp and clear, you could see every blemish. You could see, like right now, I'm perspiring a little bit because I'm just hot in this room. I'm just hot.
Yeah.
Well, that would show up on a high def camera. That shows up. The uh, the equipment has changed a lot, and the uh, the way that we broadcast has changed a lot. News writing and our weather reports, they're not in complete sentences. A lot of times we're just rattling it off, and it may or may not be grammatically correct, but it sounds like it's part of the story, and there's not any real separation between the what would be in print that would be criticized as a typographical error, and what goes in on closed captioning, which is just kind of a mishmash of everything that we do. It still has to make sense and it has to be concise, but there are some differences there that have been injected into how we do it because of the social networking and the things that we see on our social platforms. That has changed a great deal. It used to be that you could only wear a white shirt and a solid or a lightly patterned tie. Uh, for the women, it was that their dress was much different. Even just 20 years ago, the way the cameras are now and the lights, we can wear different colored shirts. We can wear things that we couldn't have worn before because it just wouldn't have looked good on camera. The computerization of a lot of what we do, we're very reliant on the internet. Technology, you kind of always are having to work to outsmart technology because it'll get the best of you,
Yep.
even if you're prepared.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of
Well,
things have changed.
well, and I just think that highlights an important point for any career is you have to have that mindset of needing to improve and wanting to learn, because there are things that you'll go through every day in any field where you're like, I have no idea. We're going to have to figure it out. How can we problem solve? How can we make that happen?
Yes.
And I just think that's always cool to see how that's happened in different industries, because it's things you don't think about. I mean, I'd never thought about going from, the little box TV sets to widescreen, how that would affect cameras and how that would affect everything that shows on the news
Yeah.
network. Like, that's never crossed my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, perfect.
Total different world. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, Carl, thank you so much for joining me
bet.
and sharing your story. This has been just absolutely amazing. One last thing before I let you go, and you already kind of shared one funny story, and if that's the one, then we'll go with that. But is there any other funny story that you can think of over any of your career that you're like, man, I just look back at that and laugh because that was just...
In doing footage for the major networks like that, if you put your story together, you put the footage together, you shoot it, you can put yourself in that story so that they can't edit you out.
Okay.
So, I was working hard on getting some good footage, and a coworker of mine, Ariana Martinez, she went out and she was in the field. I was also in the field, and we had a meteorologist in the studio that would come in and out and get stuff done. On the back side of that station is a canopy, and I set the camera up and the lights under that canopy and shot out through that snowstorm. And in between segments, I would go inside and get warmed up. And Ariana was outside the whole time. So when she came back, she was like, "Oh, that was some great stuff." She goes, "Where did you go?" And I said, "Just outside the canopy where the vans park." And she was like, "No way, I'm out there freezing, and you're just shooting the storm underneath it with heat in between the segments." So
Yeah.
there's things that happen a lot
Guys, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the My Career Path podcast. I know it was a blast to have Carl on the show, and a huge thanks to him for being willing to talk with me and share his story. If you like this episode, make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure to leave a 5-star review if you're listening on audio. It really helps me out, helps me get the show out to more people, and I just love hearing your guys' feedback. If there is a career that you guys are interested in, make sure to let me know down below or send me an email in the description, as I'd love to try to find someone who can talk about their career path and hopefully help you guys out. So until next time, catch you guys later. See ya.